Hello, my name is Ben. I've decided that I'm going to play a Magic game by myself, which is unnormal. I usually play against an opponent or many opponents, as sort of a gameplay tutorial, because most times when people play Magic they just talk forever, especially when they're learning how to play. That's because Magic can be a very complex game, but it doesn't have to be, and I will show you that and just show you that now, actually. What you do need is you need 20 life. You start out with 20 life and you try to keep that life intact while getting your opponent down to 0, because when you get down to 0 life, you're not alive anymore and you die and you lose the game. And so I've represented that with a dime and a nickel and 5 pennies. A lot of people write that down. They use dice. You can use whatever. You also need a Magic deck. Rules are it has to be 60 cards minimum in most formats. And if you don't have one, you can borrow one from a friend who's possibly going to teach you how to learn Magic, right? Or you can go down to a game shop and buy a themed deck. I wouldn't suggest trying to build a deck until you've learned how to play. So let's go ahead and start our game here. We got 7 cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, make sure I'm doing right. Good deal. First decision you got to make is whether to keep your hand. Keeping your hand is pretty much dependent on can you play things out of your hand. You don't want to just sit here forever and do nothing, right? That's the thing. Okay, so I have a card called Land. And let's go ahead and look at this card called Land. Some of these cards called Land. I got 3 land out of 7 cards, so let's see here. Alright. It's called a Plains, upper left. Its name is Plains, it's basic land. It has a symbol in the middle, it looks like an egg. That really has no bearing, actually. It's from what set it is, if you really want to know. And we got a white sun. And so this land, when tapped into for its magical power, will generate white mana. And let's go ahead and let's grab my forest. And I got another land here, and it's green, and it's a forest. There are forest, plains, swamps, mountains, and blue, but in this deck I'm only going to use forest and plains. And its symbol is green, and it taps for green mana. And magically it happens to be from the same set. Huh, that's interesting. But anyway, the important thing here is that I have 3 land. And I have at least 1 card that I can play using that 3 land because it costs 1. And I have some other things that all cost 4, but since I got 3 land there, I got a good chance to draw on another land to get that 4th land to tap into 4 magical power mana balls, whatever you want to call them. Looks like I'm going to be able to play these later on, and I do have a green, so I've met the color requirement. And so I'm going to probably keep this. And speaking of that lovely plains and that spell that costs 1, we're going to go ahead and start our turn. Turns start with restoring the board, which really right now I don't have a board to speak of. I have no cards in play, and so untapping is where you restore your board. That's going to go through nothing. I also have no cards that say upkeep, so I go through an upkeep phase. And then I get to the draw step. This is where at the point of your turn where you draw a card. And we're going to say that in this arbitrary game against an imaginary opponent that I'm going to go first. And since going first is such an advantage, there is a rule that if you go first in only a 2-player game, you don't get to draw. If you're in a multiplayer game, you do. But if you're in a duel, you don't. So I'm going to go first, which means I'm not going to get to draw my first turn, and we go into our main phase. You do everything during your main phase. The only 2 exceptions of this are abilities and a card called Instance. In the middle we saw that my plains had basic land and my forest, and that's where you basically see what types of cards you're playing. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and start my turn in my main phase. This is where I do everything except for abilities and instances, which I don't have in my hand, so we'll have to get to that later. I play my land, and being a wizard, you get to play 1 land per turn As you grow more familiar with the plane that you're on, we're planeswalkers. We're just new to this world. As I grow more familiar with this world, I'll be able to tap into more and more land for my magical mana, but that's why you only get to play one per turn. You don't get to play all your powerful spells all at once. So I'm going to tap into this land, and tapping is represented by turning it sideways. And now that I've tapped into it, I get this white mana that magically can be spent to pay the cost of spells, and I will do that now. Here we have our first spell. And up in the upper right, see my finger, let's see here, okay, right there, oop, oop, right there. It has a 1 white symbol. I tapped 1 white land, a plains. I've generated the 1 white mana. I'm going to spend it, and I'm going to pay the cost of this nice card called Savannah Lions. And it's a creature. You can tell it's a creature because down in the lower right, it has both an attack and a toughness. The attack is on the left, that's 2, and the toughness, or how much damage it can soak up, take before it dies, is 1. So it's a good attacker, not so good blocker. Good attack 2, not so good block 1, or if it takes damage 1 and in the process of a combat it'll die. So it's not a great blocker, but the important thing is that I've got a creature on the field, and creatures, once they come on the field, can attack. And they can block. And that would be great, except for he's a little bit disoriented. I just summoned him out of the mist, out of nothing. I cast him as a spell and it resolved, and now he's actually a permanent thing on the field. And he's summoning sick. He doesn't know which way is up, which way is down. He's sort of, getting his bearings. So creatures cannot attack on the first turn. That's basically the rule. So I will have to pass my turn to my opponent. My opponent will get to draw a card. He'll go through untap, upkeep, draw a card. He'll go through his main phase, let's say plays a land, and he passes the turn to me. Okay, so starting your turn, what do we do again? Okay, we got to restore the board. So we untap. Okay, we go through upkeep. I have no cards that matter upkeep. I got some cards in hand. I get to draw my very first card since I went first. I drew a plains, so I did get that 4th land drop that I'll be needing eventually. I'm going to go ahead and play a forest, moving into my main phase. And now I can interrupt my main phase, and I have the option to attack my opponent. And so I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and attack. You only played a land, my opponent, my imaginary opponent. I'm going to go ahead and attack, and I'm going to attack with my Savannah Lions. I want to attack with my Savannah Lions, and just like we turned the land sideways to show that we were using it on my previous turn, I have to turn this guy sideways to show that he is attacking and that he's been used. So I am now attacking. And my opponent can't block, so my opponent takes 2 damage. Yippee! Alright, so I'm going to end my turn there. I don't have anything in my hand that I can play for only 2 mana or money or whatever you think of it as, so I'm going to have to pass my turn. And to go to my opponent, and let's say he plays another land. He's got 2 land. He plays a 1/1 creature. Alright, so he's got a creature to block. Okay, you can't see it, it's an imaginary. Run with me here. Alright, so my turn again. I get to untap, upkeep, no cards with upkeep, don't worry about that. Get to draw my card. I will get to play another land, get to play 1 land per turn. I guess I'm on my 3rd turn now that I got 3 land. I'm in my main phase. After your draw step, you're in your main phase. I'm going to go ahead and decide that I'm going to attack. And I'm going to attack with my 2/1. And so I got to turn him sideways to represent. And but my my opponent has a 1/1 creature, and he's going to decide to block. Just let's imagine.